Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Shinobi III, brought to us by Sega. Shinobi III is a direct sequel to Revenge of Shinobi, featuring similar gameplay and even similar ninjutsu to that game. The game has Neo Zed once again returning, and Joe Musashi sets out to stop them again. So here we go with Shinobi III for the Sega Genesis. After the opening storyline for the game, we come to our main title screen, and once you have pressed start, of course, you can go right into the game or go into the options menu. In the options menu, you can adjust what difficulty you play on. I'll be playing on the normal difficulty, and you can also change the amount of shurikens that you currently start with. Once you press start, we're going to be now jumping into the actual game, starting in round 1, Z's Resurrection. You'll notice right away that the game does look similar to Revenge of Shinobi. The graphics have been improved, it has another great soundtrack that will be playing along with us, and our overall combat is very similar, having us throw shurikens as our main weapon. We can also get up close to enemies in order to use the sword, and we have a few other moves at our disposal, like the jump kick, which I will use at various times. If you double tap left or right, you will run in that direction, until you end up, of course, either running into an enemy or decide to jump. A lot of enemies in the game early on will be taken out with a single hit. You can also pick up a power-up throughout the game that will actually increase the power of your shurikens, but only until you take your next hit of damage. Keeping this is going to be key to being able to get through the game quickly. For these guys, you'll have to wait for them to actually start swinging down their sword. Then you'll be able to launch a shuriken right at them in order to take them out. When we make it to the end here, though, we'll have to take on a guy who actually has to hit multiple times with their shurikens to destroy him. If you don't have the powered up shuriken, it will take many more hits in order to defeat these guys. One of the other mechanics in the game is climbing on ropes. When you jump up and there's a climbable surface that you'll be able to scale across, you'll have to hold up on the D-pad. If you don't hold up on one of these ropes, you'll end up just falling right past it, and this can lead to an accidental death or two, especially when they're over pits. You can do a wall jump to your advantage to be able to spring off of walls in order to get higher up. Mastering this pretty early on will help you out in some of the later levels. On the top of the screen, you'll notice your life count in the upper left, your current life. Next to that, the shurikens and the number that you currently have left, and next to that, your current ninjutsu. There are 4 ninjutsus in the game, and you can select whatever one you would like to use at any given time. The ninjutsu I'll be using throughout the entire game is the one I currently have selected, the lightning bolt. This gives you a force field, which will allow you to take 3 to 5 hits from any enemies until it goes away and you actually start taking damage again. Because of the amount of hits you're allowed to take, you can usually defeat a boss before your shield goes away. For the first boss of the game, wait for him to actually get into his attack stance by you getting close to him, then deliver a hit with a shuriken. Be prepared then to jump over him when he goes flying across the screen. If you have the powered up shurikens, it will only take a few before he's defeated, and we move on to round 2. The other 3 ninjutsus, and I'm not going to even attempt to say most of the real names. You have the fire-based one, which will send pillars of fire out, which will damage a lot of enemies nearby, which will help you in a pinch, but I'd much rather use the shield later on. You also have the one that allows you to jump higher, the wind-based one. And finally, the suicide one, which will make you explode, doing a lot of damage to nearby enemies including bosses, but you sacrifice a life in order to do it. The next level of the game has us riding on a horse while taking out various enemies. You'll see the enemies come out through the background with some nice effect, and then they'll end up coming to the front for us to actually fight them. Every so often an exclamation point will appear, so be prepared to jump over a small fence. The enemies all throughout this area are only going to take a single hit, but if you attack them as soon as they're getting ready to appear, you can prevent them from jumping up in the air. If they end up getting airborne, they may be able to land on top of you. While overall this segment is not very difficult, it's a nice change of pace and something we really hadn't seen too much of in other Shinobi titles. After battling some normal enemies for a while, you'll see a yellow ninja appear in the background and then jump forward. Here is our mini-boss for this area. When he appears and jumps over you, be prepared to watch out for spears that'll launch into the ground. Not only do you have to dodge the spears from coming down, but you also have to then jump over them once they hit the ground. Keep hitting him every time he appears from that right side and jumps over you, and after 3 or 4 hits with a powered-up shuriken, he'll go down. The next segment is a lot different, as we're now in a large, futuristic-looking city. There's a couple of new enemies located here, including guys now that use guns instead of just trying to run at you or throw shurikens, as well as big guys with shields, which you have to wait for the opportunity to attack them or get up close to them and attack them directly with the sword. The second segment of the level there will have you on a slowly rising elevator. You'll notice some air ducts on the left and right sides, and every time you get close to one, a new guy will pop out and you'll have to hit him with a shuriken before he fires his gun at you. Sometimes you'll have a guy just sitting there with a big gun turret waiting to hit you as well, but you can easily hit these guys as you're slowly rising up. Just every time you see an opening, go to that side and get ready to fire a shuriken. Eventually the area will open up and you'll be outside in the more city area. Here's where things change up a bit. You'll now have some platforms on each side, sometimes directly above you, and you'll have to navigate around as the elevator continues to rise. If you don't jump off the platform in time, you will end up getting crushed, so you'll have to jump to another platform and climb up, either using your wall jump abilities or hanging on to some of the wires that are going across. Thankfully, because the enemies are above you and not coming up from below, you'll have ample opportunity to attack them with a shuriken before you have to actually go to the platform they are currently guarding. Right here can be a little bit tricky. Usually I like to stand on the platform itself and then jump up, or you can use the double jump. The double jump in the game can be very finicky, but you'll have to get used to it, especially for later levels. Basically, to use the double jump, at the very height of your jump, you'll have to press jump again. But the timing on it is actually when you're getting ready just before you end up descending from a jump, is when you'll want to press it. Practice this several times in an open area with no enemies before you actually attempt to start using it regularly in the levels. Eventually, though, we will make it to the top. You'll see a go with an arrow pointing, and we'll be in the next boss fight. The next boss is a giant brain-like creature. When it fully forms, hit it with a shuriken, and hug the left wall while it shoots down lasers from above. Then you want to run to the opposite side of the screen, wait for its force field to go away, and then hit it with another shuriken, staying far away from it so that when it ends up firing its next set of projectiles, you'll be able to dodge them. Of course, you can also use the lightning move if you want to, so that those few hits that it may get out when it fires out all its projectiles, you'll be able to take without losing your power-up ability. Then we move on to level number 3, known as Body Weapon. Level number 3 is definitely a weird level. It's inside of a weird laboratory. You'll have a couple of new creatures, including these flying brain-like bugs that'll appear above you, as well as weird toxic creatures that pop out from the goo below. For the most part, like in all the other levels, my goal is to try to run through as many of the enemies as I can, only stopping to fight whichever ones I have to. Eventually, you'll make it to a series of brains inside of tubes. When you walk near the tube, they will open up, and you'll have to actually attack the brain inside of it. If you don't immediately hit the brain as soon as it pops out, it will start bouncing around the room. Sometimes, though, when the brains are jumping all around, they won't actually hit you unless they try to do an attack to you. It's kind of a little bit weird the way they end up just trying to jump around you without actually fighting you sometimes. And the same goes for the flying bugs as well. After dealing with a bunch of the brains, you'll eventually make it to some conveyor belts, which you'll have to cling onto and shimmy your way across. Be careful, of course, on these conveyor belts you don't accidentally fall into the toxic goo down below. On the very far right side of this area, you can pick up some power-ups, and then you're going to want to jump on the conveyor belt and jump up. After grabbing those items in the upper left, grab onto the ceiling and shimmy your way across in order to get past this area. I'll show here, you can pick up another couple of power-ups if you do need them. Over here, eventually the screen will scroll and then stop. You'll see a bunch of those brain tubes start falling down into the toxic goo, opening up and to try to attack you. So be ready and get ready to start firing shurikens directly at the brains to take them all out. After you defeat a certain number of brains, you'll end up being able to move on as the toxic goo will end up dissipating. The next area is extremely weird. It's pretty much a bio mess for sure. You'll have the boss of the level in the background trying to hit you with stuff, and you'll see a little target, as well as you'll have giant antlions that pop out of the ground and try to grab you. When you get up close, they pop out so you can end up hitting them with your sword. Only attempt to jump over them if you're at a high enough distance that you'll be able to clear them and not be able to get grabbed by those pincers. The other challenging aspect of the area is that you're consistently sinking, so you'll have to keep jumping in order to avoid falling all the way underneath the whatever it is that is coating the entire level. When you make it to the boss chamber, first start off by running close to the enemy and hit him directly in the eye with a shuriken. As long as you're standing right in front of him, you'll avoid the giant hand that pops out. He'll then move closer, so you'll have to back away now because he'll get close to where the arm pops out. Use your lightning move to put a force field on, and try to do your best to avoid the giant hand as it pops out by using the double jump. Every time it tries to attack, immediately follow that up by hitting the eyeballs of the giant creature either with the sword or a shuriken. Eventually he'll use a giant laser, and when he does this, you'll have to do the double jump and time it just right so that you double jump over the laser and it's fully dissipated before you end up coming in contact with the area it covers. Once you deliver enough hits though, the round is cleared and we move on to round number 4, Destruction. Level number 4 starts off similarly to level number 2, and instead of a horse, this time we're on a surfboard. The same mechanics pretty much apply. We have ramps that we can use to jump up into the air, and we'll have to jump up and hit the different ninjas that are riding on the hovering bikes. There's a good amount of power-ups scattered throughout the area after one of those ramps, so if you time your jump right on the ramp, you'll be able to pick them all up. Watch out though with the bike ninjas, as they will drop things down into the water below, but you can time your jump to jump over the item they drop and deliver a hit to them at the same time. It unfortunately is pretty tough to actually not get hit at all during the course of the segment, so I usually end up losing my power-up and take a little bit of damage. Thankfully, they give you some power-ups to increase my health back up, but don't usually give me a power-up to get my power shurikens back. At the end of the area, you'll have to fight a mini-boss, just like we did during the second level. You'll have this big mech that'll fly in. Hit it a bunch of times as it's circling around before it goes slightly off screen. When it comes back, it'll start throwing out the same little mines that the other ninjas were throwing out. Hit him a few times and he'll go back off screen, coming back with the shield. He'll then launch out a projectile that, once it goes into the air, will explode, coming down in a 3-shot spread shot that you can time your jump in order to get over. Just jump over the little mines he throws out, and jump over that fire that he shoots out with that 3-shot, and just keep firing their shurikens every time he ends up taking the shield back. After enough hits though, he will explode and we move on to the next area. The next area has us jumping on a series of pipes and a lot of platforming over a small amount of water. If you drop down into the water below, you will lose a life, so be very careful. A lot of the water you'll either have to shimmy along pipes above, or land on top of barrels that are floating on the water. When you land on the barrels, they will start to sink, so you'll have to be careful and not ride them all the way down to a watery grave. Here we'll have to climb up some pipes, run across, and drop back down. Nothing too difficult, though this does start to put more of the acrobatics into play, of having you do the double jumps at the right times, being able to then explore areas, such as here where we can't get over the pipe to the right, so we have to go back a little bit and climb amongst a series of pipes upwards, and then be able to get over the larger pipe. Flying enemies are introduced. These guys still take a single hit from our power shuriken, but they're basically flying ninjas that will throw out shurikens. These guys are a little bit annoying because of the way they fly into the screen, especially in scrolling areas that we'll be seeing later on. Watch out also on the pipes, as from now on you'll have various pipes throughout the game that will spew out steam that you'll have to wait for that to dissipate before you're able to get past it. Eventually you'll see another one of those go arrows pointing, and you'll be moving back onto the surfboard for the boss fight for the level. After a few hits with my shurikens, I like to use my armor and then immediately duck down and continue firing. Even though he's firing at me, I can duck down and keep firing shurikens at him. After a while he'll explode and then go under the water, eventually re-emerging. Wait a few seconds, don't waste any shurikens until he fully builds himself back up. Once he does that, then you can jump up and start firing the shurikens at his front gun, trying to do your best to jump over the projectiles and gunfire. After you destroy the gun, then start destroying the actual shield and dodge the missiles that he starts launching out. He can fire out quite a lot of missiles. This can be a bit difficult to actually jump in between and avoid, so keep your eye on the missiles more so than even your character while you're trying to maneuver in between them. Deliver as many of those hits when you can, and then when he goes over to the left side, dodge more missiles until eventually he retreats back to the right, where we'll be able to hit him again and hopefully take him out. After he's defeated, we've beaten level number 4, and we move on to level 5, the Electric Demon. The level starts off in a burning forest. You'll see little arches on the ground. These are mines, so you want to make sure that you don't land on top of them. The area is filled with the military-esque guys that we saw earlier on in the game. These guys, of course, will either run at you and then fire, or they're at stationary turrets. Also included here are big silos that when you stand on top of them for just a few seconds, that added pressure will cause them to explode, so you want to get off of them quickly. Running and doing the jump kick by jumping up into the air and attacking will allow you to bounce off the heads of enemies and be able to avoid a lot of the mines. Just be careful when you do it that when you land on contact with the ground, you're over any nearby mines. A new enemy during this time will be the guys who fire out the mortar-like cannon shots up into the air. They will come out in a diagonal direction. When moving ahead in the area, when you first start seeing these guys, take it slow so that you can see where their fire is coming from, wait for the opportunity, and then jump in with the drop kick. There's also some shielded boomerang-like guys, but these can easily be taken out either with the sword hits or your jumping kick as well. Thankfully, there's mortar-like bombs just fly right overhead, so you can duck down and deliver a shuriken to them, especially even if they're set up in a row like they are right here. When you make it to the end of the area, it's pretty much a rematch against that mech-like guy we fought as the sub-boss of the last level. Deliver a couple of shurikens and jump over his head. He'll come charging forward after a few shots of gunfire. When he comes back, be sure to jump over him. He'll then throw out a couple of things of more gunfire, hit him with some more shurikens, and repeat the process until he's defeated. Once inside begins one of the more annoying areas of the entire game. Here we have to use bombs to help us out by destroying platforms so that we can make it lower down. In this area, if you end up getting to a spot where it seems like you can't continue, sometimes you'll have to backtrack to find either a crate with a bomb inside of it, or you may have to find an elevator that is set up so you can go up that way. There's a lot of pipes also for you to be able to hang on to sometimes in order to keep moving your way up. Over here, take out this turret guy. You'll then see another guy right after that. Hit him and then jump onto the elevator. Use a double jump in order to make it up to the platform and then jump and maneuver your way up here. Use the crate and the bomb in order to free this platform, then jump on top of it to slowly ride it across to the far right side. Once over here, open up another one of those bombs. After it explodes, drop down. Take out the turret guy above if you want to, and then what you'll have to do is get to the edge and do a jump, just slightly off screen, and be able to safely still land on the platform you're on. What you've done is open up a bomb on the far right side that you can't see because it's off screen. If you do it right though, it will open up a platform so you can make it into here. If you come over here and the area is blocked, you'll have to backtrack and open up that crate. Now, you can also use your ninjutsu, like the fire, to help you out and destroy that crate so the bomb goes off while you're still standing on that side. However, that's of course a waste of a ninjutsu. In the next room, activate the elevators, go to the far right elevator and get a bomb to explode, and then go to the left elevator and start going upwards, bouncing off the walls and through pipes as you make your way up. This is where all that double jumping and wall jumping I said to practice a little bit earlier starts to really come in handy. Use the pipes here, but be very careful that you don't jump too high up so that the turret guys end up firing their machine gun fire at you. Sometimes it can be very difficult to get that double jump to activate. At the very top though, it's time for the next boss fight, and this time it's a giant robot, similar to one of the bosses we fought in Revenge of Shinobi. This mecha-like Godzilla will have to be attacked with the little green square in its chest. It has a couple attacks, its main one being that it fires out 3 blasts from its chest that you can actually destroy by hitting them. You can use your lightning, of course, to defend yourself. Then, when it shoots out its giant amount of fire atomic breath, run away to the opposite side and do a big jump over it while it's trying to move back and forth. The hardest thing to dodge, honestly, ends up being all the debris that falls from the sky. If you hang out on the hands of the giant mech, you'll be able to duck down and destroy the fire from its chest. After it's defeated, we have completed the next level, and we move on. Level number 6 is known as Traps, and traps meaning, well, a maze. But before we can get to the maze, we start off on a rocky cliff-like area with a whole bunch of falling rocks. During this segment, you'll have to deal with some enemies on the rocks themselves, just pretty standard guys. But you'll also have to deal with those flying bat-like ninjas that will try to swoop in and hit you with a shuriken. These guys are extremely annoying. You'll have to keep jumping up using your double jump at the right height sometime to make sure that you safely land on the next rock as it's falling downwards. If you go off screen, you will end up losing a life. Now, thankfully, the rocks do stay on screen. It's not immediately after you go off screen you end up losing that life. You have a few seconds to work with, even once the rock has gone out of view. But it's still a little bit difficult to get used to. And like I said before, I've always had issues with the double jump in the game, sometimes not working when I need it to, and this has caused me a life or two over the course of my playing. When you do the double jump into the air, you'll notice that at the height of the double jump, you can also throw out a huge amount of shurikens that take up a large amount of screen. And this can actually be very helpful during this section to take out maybe a flying guy who just has appeared, or take out one of the guys on an upcoming rock that you're getting ready to jump to. It's a pretty lengthy segment, and of course if you end up losing the life, you'll have to start the segment over again, which is what makes this whole thing a pain. When you make it to the bottom of the area, you'll move to another area where you'll have 3 falling rocks steady, and then you'll have this floating, rotating feather going around. Hit it with a shuriken, and it won't hurt you when the feathers start flying all around. He'll then reform and actually start moving around the area. Hit him with a couple of shurikens to send him flying off and back into that ball form. Just keep repeating the process each time he does this, and eventually he will be destroyed and we'll move on to the next segment. Overall, a pretty easy sub-boss compared to some of the other ones we've dealt with. Now begins the maze-like area for the level. You'll have a bunch of ninjas in the first room along with spikes popping out of the ground. Do the jump kick to help you keep afloat and keep bouncing off their heads, but be very careful of those spikes. Next room, you'll have a bunch of crates on the right side. Stand on top of the crates and double jump your way all the way up, slowly but surely, on each of the crates. If you end up attacking while doing that double jump, you'll probably destroy the crate that you need to jump to next. You also have to avoid those flying enemies. In the next room, this is very tricky. Jump up and get in between 2 of the spike pillars. Jump in between them, but be very careful not to go too far up that you end up clipping the spikes at the top. But you want to just go barely over it and get to the next set of them, eventually landing safely on the platforms. This is extremely tricky, and it'll probably take a lot of practice to get used to so that you'll be able to keep moving in between and doing those jumps on the walls without accidentally hitting the spikes. In the next room, you'll have more regular ninjas. Do some running attacks when you can. And then when you make it over to the far right, be very careful of these crushers. If the crushers hit you, in between them, it's an instant death. In the next room, ignore the first door and then go into the second door that has the demon mask above it. For the boss of this area, what you'll have to do is he has a fake version and of course the real version. Every time you deliver a hit to the real version, you'll see him flash. The fake one will just disappear. Use your lightning move to help you out greatly so that you'll be able to take a couple of hits, because he fires out a ton of projectiles while waving his hair all around. Once you've delivered enough hits to him though, the lights will come back on and he'll then just be by himself repeating the same process. He'll throw out a new item though, this time with fans that'll start flying around the room. However, with the lightning shield still equipped, we should be able to deliver a couple of hits though as soon as he comes back around and destroy him before he's able to get a couple of projectiles off. Once he's taken care of, we move on to the 7th and final level of the game, the final confrontation. The first part of the last level of the game has us moving along the bottom of a giant flying ship. You'll have to wait once in a while for a giant laser to pop out of the bottom of the exhaust of the flying ship, and then you'll be able to jump past it. Be very careful when jumping and climbing here because, like I said before, you'll have to hold the up button on the D-pad when you're doing this so that you grab on. If you don't do this, you'll end up just falling straight down to the ground and go off screen and lose a life. You'll also have to deal with random amounts of steam popping out. A pretty easy area if you take your time, but if you try to rush it, you'll probably find yourself getting hit and end up dying. In the next area, get on the elevator and it'll start to move up. This elevator segment's a lot trickier than the one we dealt with earlier on in the game. You'll have a couple of little flying satellite guys that will pop down and try to fire at you, as well as guns that are attached to the different beams as you're going up. It'll start off with only 2, one on each side, as well as a couple of those little satellites, but slowly but surely that will increase to 3 and 4 at a time, and they all will fire out before you're going to be able to take them out. So time your jump so that you jump in between all the bullets as they come at you diagonally downwards. With only 3 of them on screen, it can be easy to try to get in between them. However, when 4 of them are on screen, I usually end up getting hit at least once. Thankfully though, we'll be able to get another power up to our shuriken before we end up getting farther into the level. Eventually the area will close up, so jump up hitting the walls and get up to the opening above. On the next screen, grab the health onto the left side and then start moving across the top of the ship. Here you'll have some of those little small guns we just dealt with on the elevator, but the big threat is the giant cannons. These take a couple of hits to destroy and they fire out big blasts in rapid succession, giving you only a little bit of opportunity to destroy them before they end up firing again. Now you can destroy their fire by hitting the fire as it's flying towards you, but this is difficult to do quickly. You'll also have big cannons that fire out a diagonal shot, like machine gun-like fire, straight up diagonally left. Wait for that to, of course, disappear for a second, and then get in to destroy the big cannons. After all those giant cannons and everything, they decide to throw a couple of steam vents at you. Not necessarily as threatening as the giant cannons we've been dealing with on the top of the ship. After all that, a couple of more steam vents. There are a few of those little satellite guys flying around as well, but eventually we can make it inside the building. Once inside, things get extremely difficult, as you'll have electricity running throughout a ton of the walls, floors, and everything else in between as you have to make your way through a series of different platform jumps, dropping down areas, climbing on others, and doing a lot of wall jumping. Be very careful with your wall jumping. Don't try to just jump up as high as you can each time. Slowly make your way up so that when you jump up and can grab on to the piping above, that you end up grabbing the pipe right away instead of going above the pipe and hit the electricity. Here, I suggest climbing up and then drop down to give you a good perspective to get in between the columns. This is the exact same thing we did in the previous level with the spike columns, but now we have to deal with them with a little bit of electricity. Same amount of damage though. Climb up the next side and drop down here. Once down here, you'll have a couple of elevators that start appearing. Ride a little moving platform as it goes through the electricity, jumping off, landing safely on a platform, and then wait for it to keep going. Here, you'll have to run along the actual ceiling by shimmying across, wait for the moving platform to come by, and then, of course, drop down on top of it and ride it down. Once it makes it over to that far left, you can drop off if you want to. Thankfully, there's a platform down below, and then start moving along these giant pillars. When you land on top of them, they do start to sink. Wait till they go pretty far down before jumping to the next one. This way, you'll avoid jumping too high and hitting the electricity. Here we'll have to duck down, wait a few seconds for the next moving platform to appear. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for it to spawn, but eventually it will, and then you want to ride that over to the right. Jump to a couple of series of little platforms that will start to fall when you land on them, and then some more of those big giant pillars that sink into the ground when we land on them. On the last one, you have to do a big double jump. Then, when the next platform starts to fall, do a big double jump over to the right to land. Trickiest and hardest jump for sure to make in the entire game. Then ride the moving platform down, duck underneath when it gets to the very bottom, and then do some wall jumps. Wait for the moving platform to make its way finally upwards, and now another tricky part of it going in between and back and forth. When it gets close to the electric walls, do a jump up into the air so that when you land back down, you'll land on the platform and avoid electricity. Do a running jump over to the right, shimmy across, land on top of a pillar, and land safely on the next one. After one more shimmying section, we can open the door and move on to the final area. Here, what you'll have to do is climb up using wall jumps and moving very quickly as the wall will come in to crush you. Along the way, there's electricity on the left wall. So, what you'll have to do is sometimes wait to make sure that you move the screen up so you can see the electricity, but don't jump off the wall yet. Fall down just a little bit so that you wall jump off of a safe area and then continue your way up. At the very end, you'll have a couple of boxes to replenish some of your items, and then it's time for the final boss fight of the game. And considering this is the final boss, it's a lot easier than the level that leads up to him. When the fight begins, break out the electricity shield so you have protection, and then fire out immediately a bunch of shurikens at him. He'll fire out a whole bunch of shurikens at you as well, but they'll just go right past you as long as you have the shield. If you want to avoid him, of course, you'll want to use the double jump. After a few hits, he'll explode and power up even more, causing the next form of him. Here, he'll use some big giant blast out at you. Just keep throwing those shurikens at him and jump over the big blast. He'll then kick across the room all the way over to the left. Move over to the right a little bit, turn around, and keep firing shurikens at him. Once he jumps into the air and explodes, that's it, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Shinobi 3. And there you have Shinobi 3 for the Sega Genesis. Probably my favorite game in the Shinobi series. Has another great soundtrack, some really good action. It does have some very difficult parts that take a pretty good amount of trial and error to get used to, but the fun mechanics of being able to wall jump and even the double jump when it wants to work are very fun to use. This would also be one of the last Shinobi games created until the resurgence of Shinobi on the PlayStation 2 many years later, which was very different from the previous games in the series. One interesting thing to note about the development of Shinobi 3 is there actually was a different version of the game, pretty much almost fully complete, and was actually shown off in 1992. However, that version of the game did not see an actual full release. The game was modified into the game that we see now and released a year later in 1993. Though, that unfinished version of the game has since been found and leaked for all to play. After the credits, we see our to be continued screen appear as we watch Joe Musashi riding on the back of the horse. After a while, he will ride off and the game will go back to the main title screen. You can start the game all over again. But with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.